I never imagined that my life could change so much in a single night. But that's exactly what happened when I attended a Diddy party. You might think that receiving an invite to Miami's most exclusive celebrity party would be a dream come true. But I assure you, that night was far from the dream I had in mind. It all began rather simply. I was living in LA like so many others, trying to make it big in the music industry. I had no connections and started wondering if I was wasting my time clinging to a dream that might never happen. Then, out of the blue, a friend introduced me to a guy everyone called the Prince. He was wealthy, mysterious, and well-connected with major producers. We met a few times, and he listened to my music. He promised to take my career to a whole new level, and even hinted at introducing me to big names. That's when the invitation came a chance to attend an exclusive party during Miami's Ultra Music Week, hosted by none other than P. Diddy. It was described as a life-changing, unforgettable wild night. When I arrived, though, I immediately sensed something was off. The venue was enormous, glitzy, and straight out of a magazine. Everywhere I looked, I saw celebrities I had only ever seen on TV. Models with barely any clothing roamed around, everyone looking picture perfect. But the more I observed, the stranger I felt. Before I could process anything, security stopped us, confiscated our phones, and sealed them in bubble-like pouches. No cameras, no recordings. That was my first warning sign to leave. They weren't just worried about photos leaking. They were hiding something much bigger and darker. But I was naive and brushed it off, thinking it was just high-profile party protocol. Inside, the scene was surreal. Despite the music and lights, the atmosphere was oddly dark. I noticed intoxicated people by the pool and slender girls working as waitresses, pushing more drinks onto the guests. The air felt heavy with cigarette smoke and the overpowering scent of perfume. I picked up a glass and tried to blend in, but deep down, I felt out of place, like someone was watching me, though I couldn't see them. Then I saw him Diddy. He wasn't just the party host, he was the king of this domain. Walking around the rooms with a predatory gleam in his eyes, he scanned the crowd like a vulture. Eventually, his gaze fell on me. He nodded in my direction, as if choosing me from the crowd. At first, he kept his distance, watching me every now and then, like he was trying to read or understand me. I felt uneasy. Everywhere I turned, he was there, watching from a dark corner or smirking to himself, as if he knew something I didn't. Things got even stranger when one of his men approached me. He was part of Diddy's group and handed me a pair of white slippers. "Put these on and come inside," he said. "It's only for VIPs." I hesitated, but felt trapped by the moment. This could be my big break, I thought. What harm could it do? I slipped on the slippers and followed him through a set of heavy double doors into an area cordoned off from the main party. This part of the mansion was quieter, darker, and eerier. The loud music was muffled, replaced by faint whispers and laughter echoing down the hallways. The room we entered was lavishly decorated, but unsettlingly intimate. There were plush couches, dim lighting, and a strange mix of people lounging around. Some seemed intoxicated, others completely detached. A few glanced at me as I walked in, their faces unreadable. It felt like I had walked into a different world, one far removed from the glittering chaos outside. Diddy was there, sitting at the head of the room, surrounded by a group of beautiful people who looked as though they were under some kind of spell. His smile was warm but calculated as he beckoned me over. "Welcome," he said. His voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it. "I hear you've got talent. Let's see if you're ready for the big leagues." My heart raced. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about my music. Something was off. The air felt heavier, the energy in the room darker. He handed me a glass of champagne and gestured for me to sit. "Relax," he said. "This is where the magic happens." I took a sip of the champagne, trying to steady my nerves. The bubbles felt sharp on my tongue, and for a moment, I thought I tasted something bitter. My head began to swim, but I chalked it up to nerves and the intensity of the evening. The conversations around me were cryptic, filled with half-finished sentences and inside jokes that I couldn't follow. It felt like everyone in the room was in on a secret I didn't know. Diddy leaned in closer, his eyes piercing into mine. "Do you know what it takes to make it in this industry?" he asked, his tone suddenly serious. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Hard work? Talent?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "More than that," he said. "It's about loyalty, sacrifice, trusting the right people." The word sacrifice lingered in the air, heavy and ominous. Before I could respond, he motioned to one of his men, who brought out a small black box. He opened it to reveal a sleek, diamond-encrusted necklace. "Put this on," Diddy said, his voice commanding. I hesitated, unsure of what was happening. "What is this for?" "A token of trust," he replied. "If you're serious about this, you'll wear it." My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I felt paralyzed. Everyone in the room was watching, their eyes expectant. I reached for the necklace, my hands trembling. As I fastened it around my neck, a strange sensation washed over me. It felt heavier than it should have, almost suffocating. "Good," Diddy said, his smile returning. "Now you're one of us." The rest of the night was a blur. The champagne, the lights, the whispers, everything seemed to blend together in a haze. At some point, I found myself back in the main party, the noise and chaos assaulting my senses. I searched for an exit, desperate to leave, but the mansion felt like a labyrinth. Everywhere I turned, I saw faces that looked familiar yet distant, like they were watching me through a veil. Finally, I stumbled into a quiet corner and sat down, trying to collect myself. That's when I noticed the necklace. Its weight felt unbearable, and when I touched it, it felt warm, almost alive. Panic set in as I realized I couldn't remove it. The clasp wouldn't budge, and the more I tried, the tighter it seemed to get. A woman approached me, her eyes wide and filled with a mix of fear and pity. She leaned in close and whispered, "You need to leave. Now, before it's too late." Her words sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I stood up, my vision swimming, and made my way toward the exit. Security tried to stop me, but I pushed past them, my desperation giving me strength. I ran out into the cool Miami night, the sound of the party fading behind me. As I stumbled down the street, I felt the necklace tighten around my throat, cutting off my breath. I clawed at it, tears streaming down my face, until finally it snapped. The moment it fell to the ground, the pressure lifted and I gasped for air. I looked around, disoriented and terrified. The city lights blurred as I flagged down a cab and gave the driver the address of my hotel. When I got back to my room, I collapsed on the bed, shaking and trying to process what had happened. The next morning, I woke up to find the necklace gone. My phone, still sealed in its pouch, was sitting on the nightstand. When I finally opened it, I saw that all my contacts from the party had disappeared. It was as if the entire night had been erased. But I knew it hadn't been a dream. The weight of what I had experienced lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks behind the glitz and glamour. That night changed me. It opened my eyes to the price of fame and the sacrifices some are willing to make. I left LA soon after and returned home, choosing to pursue my music on my own terms. The memory of that party still haunts me, but it also serves as a warning. Not everything that glitters is gold, and sometimes the price of entry is far too high.
The night began with a sense of nervous excitement, a faint buzz that coursed through my veins as I prepared to step into a world I had only ever dreamed of. The prince, a man whose connections and reputation preceded him, had invited me to what he called a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The party was to be held at a sprawling mansion, its grandeur hidden behind wrought iron gates and a tree-lined driveway. I knew it would be the kind of night that could change everything. Or so I thought. When we arrived, the mansion seemed almost alive, pulsing with a dark energy that made my stomach churn. People moved in and out of the entrance like shadows, their faces obscured by masks that gave the event an eerie, otherworldly feel. I looked back at the prince, hoping for some reassurance, but he simply smirked and waved me forward. "Just you," he said, his voice low and dismissive. Something deep inside me screamed to leave, to run as far away as I could. But ambition whispered louder, drowning out my instincts. This was my chance, wasn't it? As I stepped inside, the opulence of the mansion was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, and velvet drapes framed the windows. But the beauty of the place was a thin veil over something much darker. The further I walked, the more the dreamlike quality of the night twisted into a nightmare. The rooms were filled with people engaged in unspeakable acts, their laughter and moans blending into a cacophony of depravity. It was as if I had stumbled into a realm where morality ceased to exist. And then I saw him. Standing at the center of it all was P. Diddy, his presence commanding the room like a predator surveying its prey. He wore a tailored suit that seemed to shimmer under the dim light, but it was his eyes that struck me. They were cold, calculating, and filled with an inhuman darkness that sent a shiver down my spine. He caught my gaze and began walking toward me, his smile widening with each step. "Are you enjoying my little party?" he asked, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "You know, after tonight, your life will never be the same." I couldn't respond. My throat felt dry, my body frozen. He stared at me for a moment longer, as if savoring my discomfort, before walking away. His words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. I knew then that I needed to leave. Whatever opportunities I thought this night might bring were not worth the price. I turned to make my way back to the door, but before I could take more than a few steps, he was there again, blocking my path. His movements were almost unnatural, as if he could anticipate my every thought. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and unyielding. I forced a smile, trying to mask my fear, but it only seemed to amuse him. "Don't worry," he said, his voice dripping with false reassurance. "You'll get used to this." Slowly but surely, the words sent a chill through me. I yanked my shoulder away from his grasp and bolted, weaving through the crowd like a desperate animal searching for an escape. The faces around me blurred into grotesque masks of indulgence and excess. I spotted the prince near the entrance, his smirk now more sinister than ever. He knew. He had known all along what this night would entail, and he had led me into it willingly. "Don't you want to make it big?" he taunted, his voice echoing in my ears as I pushed past him. My heart raced as I stumbled through the mansion, searching for a way out. Finally, I saw it, an unguarded door leading to the woods. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted through it, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. The sound of the party faded behind me as I ran deeper into the darkness. My mind raced with thoughts of what I had just witnessed and what might have happened if I had stayed. When I finally reached the edge of the property, I called a cab, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. The ride home was a blur. My heart pounded in my chest, and my thoughts were consumed by the horror of the night. The mansion, the people, and P. Diddy's eyes, all of it felt like a fever dream, but the lingering sense of dread told me it had been all too real. In the days that followed, I couldn't escape the images burned into my mind. Every time I saw P. Diddy's face on TV, smiling like he was untouchable, I felt a surge of anger and fear. His charm and charisma were a mask, hiding the darkness I had seen that night, and I knew I wasn't the only one. There had to be others who had been drawn into his web, lured by promises of success and glamour, only to find themselves trapped in a nightmare. As time passed, the truth began to surface. Victims started to speak out, their stories painting a chilling picture of what went on behind the closed doors of those extravagant parties. Allegations of sexual assault, harassment, and even sex trafficking emerged, each one more horrifying than the last. People who had once idolized P. Diddy now saw him for what he truly was, a man who used his power and influence to exploit and control. The media frenzy was relentless. Headlines screamed about the dark side of fame, and interviews with survivors revealed the extent of the abuse. Some described being coerced into illegal activities under threats, while others recounted moments of pure terror as they realized there was no way out. For years, these stories had been silenced, buried under layers of wealth and influence. But now, the world was listening. In 2025, P. Diddy faced a trial that would determine his fate. The courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and curious onlookers. all eager to see justice served. The victims' testimonies were heartbreaking, their voices trembling as they recounted the horrors they had endured. Each story added another layer to the portrait of a man who had built his empire on the suffering of others. As I watched the trial unfold, I couldn't help but think about that night at the mansion. The memories were still vivid, each detail etched into my mind like a scar. I thought about the moment I decided to run, the fear that had propelled me out of that house and into the woods. It had been the right decision, but it had come at a cost. The dreams I had once chased so fervently now seemed hollow, tainted by the darkness I had glimpsed. Diddy's downfall was swift and brutal. As the evidence mounted, his once untouchable image crumbled. The verdict was clear: guilty on multiple counts, including sexual assault and human trafficking. The sentence was severe, a reflection of the lives he had destroyed and the pain he had caused. For the victims, it was a moment of vindication, though it could never truly erase the scars of the past. Even as justice was served, the impact of his actions lingered. The stories of that mansion and others like it became a symbol of the darker side of fame, a reminder of the dangers that lurked behind the glittering facade of the entertainment industry. For me, it was a lesson I would never forget. Ambition had nearly led me into the jaws of a predator, but survival had given me a second chance. Now, when I see his face on the news, no longer smiling, but shadowed by the weight of his crimes, I feel a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth has come to light, and sorrow for the countless lives that were forever changed by his actions. The mansion, once a symbol of opulence and power, now stands empty, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. And I, too, carry the echoes of that night, a constant reminder of the darkness that hides in the brightest of places.